Nominating committee, this is geared more towards units, but also works for any of our council officers, nominating committee peoples. Let's start it. So really the nominating committee is one of the most important committees that PTA has, because it defines and helps determine who the next board is. And as we know, I'm sure a lot of us by now have been on really well-functioning boards and other boards that are not quite so well-functioning. And so it's really the job of the nominating committee is to find the best functioning board you can that represents the student population, the parent population of the school. So let's see. So there are several roles in the nomination process. There are the parliamentarian, which is me, has a relatively small role, but important in kicking off the nominating committee process. The parliamentarian should meet with the nominating committee the first time and just go over some of the documents they'll need and some of the ground rules and some of the instructions. They should read out, they should get a copy of the units or the council's bylaws and focus on Articles 5 and Article 6, which are the officers in the elections. It just goes over timing, what actual officers are in the bylaws that we need to, for positions we need to fill, and also the duties of the officers. So it's a really good place to start the nominating committee meeting. And then CAPTA has some great information on their website, and I will paste these links in the chat as we go along. And also this PowerPoint with links will be available afterwards if you like. So there's a election information checklist, which is a nomination committee checklist, which sort of just covers everything the nominating committee will need from the very first meeting through producing your slate to before the election. And then there's one that's just the general election information. If you have, it has tabs at the bottom that'll help you answer questions on any questions you might have during the whole searching for candidates process. And again, you can always reach out to me if you have any specific questions. So the next role is the role of the committee. That's the main part. There's the chair. So at the first meeting, the committee should elect a chair. Chair's main job is to make sure the meetings happen. So just basically get people together, make sure everybody's together, and that you're on track to have the slate ready for when it needs to go out, which is 28 days before the election. Other than that, the chair is just a member of the committee. Committees, usually in units, there are 3 committee members, and there are 1 or 2 alternates. In our council, there's, I believe it's 5. I should know this, but so 5 committee members. So in the bylaws, it will tell actually the number of committee members that you need. And hopefully a lot of you already have your nominating committee. The alternates are just in case somebody that was elected to the committee was not able to show up for the first meeting. If everybody on the main part of the committee is there at the first meeting, the alternates, their job's done. They are no longer required to be alternates. You're free to go about your normal business. And then so what the committee's job is to end up with a result is a report of the nominating committee. And this is a document that identifies all of the different positions that are up for election at the election that's happening usually in March, and signed off by all the committee members. So it needs to be signed. I'm sure if it's difficult getting, because I'm sure a lot of you will be meeting over Zoom, we could figure out some way of doing digital agreements before it's posted. But it's basically to say, yes, we all agree that these are the candidates. And then the slate needs to be posted 28 days before the election. So essentially a month before the association meeting where there is an election. And I am posting in here the PDF for the nominating committee report. It's basically just fill it in, sign at the bottom, nothing fancy. So that's the nuts and bolts of forming the committee, what the results are. Now we'll get into the main part of it, which is the responsibility of the committee. So going into this, the nominating committee is to view that all positions are considered vacant. We don't have any positions in council or in units that are 2-year positions. They're all 1-year positions. So as of the end of June, every position is open. So that includes if you have a fantastic president who is eligible to run again next year, that's great. That position is still open, and you still need to consider that position for your slate of candidates. The next one is to then, as a committee, identify who on your current board is performing really well. And if they're on the board and they're performing really well and you would like to consider them again for next year, that's great. Then ask them if they would like to continue serving on the board. And if they would, are they eligible to run for that position? As an example, in council, almost all of our slots, people are eligible to run again, with the exception of auditor. So if they're eligible to run again and they would like to serve in that role, great. You can go, and you as a committee determine that that person has been doing really well, you would like them to continue, you can go ahead and fill them into that role. But just start from the default that all positions are open, because you want to consider to make sure that you actually have the best board possible. If they're not able to run again in that position, maybe they would be great for another position. So you can consider them for that. There is no time limit, term limit for serving on a board, only in specific roles. So after you've done that, then it's you've identified your the opening slots, and that's where the work comes in. So as you're searching for candidates, they need to have been members for 60 days prior to the election. So that generally means, just the timeline we're on, they need to have been members now. That prevents people from stacking a board with new members who are not familiar with PTA. It has happened where people will buy a membership and then I want to be considered. That's not best practices. Doesn't mean they can't run from the floor. They just need to have been, they still can run from the floor during the election if they're a member for 30 days before that. But when you're considering candidates, don't consider any candidates that are less than members less than 60 days prior to the elections. There may be exceptions if you're at a middle school or a high school and you want to consider somebody who is coming up from either a middle school or an elementary school that is very active in PTA and you'd like to consider them. If you have questions about that, reach out to me, because there are ways to work with that, because that sometimes is a possibility where you've got a really great PTA leader that's coming up from an elementary school to your middle school and you'd like for them to be on the board. So we can talk about ways to handle that specifically. And then besides membership, you really need to make sure that the candidate understands the roles and the responsibilities that they're agreeing to, if they agree to be on the slate. Here is a link to CAPTA's job descriptions for every single possible PTA role. It's a good way, it's a good thing to forward to them, to let them know what the role of secretary is, what the role of treasurer is. It's a lengthy document. It can scare anybody away because it covers every single aspect. So it's also a good idea to offer to connect them with your current treasurer or secretary or whoever they would be replacing, if you feel comfortable with that, so they can find out firsthand what it's like to be, let's say, the treasurer at Don Benito. And then make sure that they understand the meeting commitments, like when are the association meetings, when are the executive board meetings, so they really understand what they're committing to. Okay, next slide. And then here are some tools. I haven't used them when I was on the nominating committee, but they're a good place to start with. California PTA has some sample interview questions. So if you're reaching out and you don't really know the candidate, like maybe somebody else recommended them, there's some good questions on there to just get a feel for their commitment to PTA, their understanding of PTA, and their understanding of the roles and responsibilities, because you really don't want to talk somebody into joining the board and then not have them fully understand what the responsibility is, because it puts them in an uncomfortable position and it doesn't help the unit. And so, and then there's also a candidate checklist to just check to see, are these people that come to, is this somebody that comes to the meeting regularly? Is this somebody that has done work with the PTA? Okay, and then here's some don'ts. So don't submit a name just because they're already on the board. So, and this has happened in the past where there's been people that have on the board, they want to run a second term, and the nomination committee's called and said, what do? They want to run. We don't think they're good for that role. If the committee does not think they're good for that position, don't put them in that spot. It's better to have massage some hurt feelings now rather than having either a dysfunctional board or somebody who's not capable of fulfilling that role. It gets much harder to make changes once the election happens. So it really is up to the nominating committee to make sure you've done the best job you can finding someone. That said, it's okay to leave a spot open. Especially now that you've only got maybe a few weeks, 3 weeks to find, if you have not been able to find somebody to fill that role, it is okay to leave that spot open on the slate. You can continue looking. The slate does have to be posted a month before the election. You can continue looking and recruiting people to run from the floor. So that's a process that when elections happen, if there's an opening, ask if there's any nominations from the floor. The person can self-nominate, or you as a member of the nominating committee can say, I nominate so-and-so. So that is a way to fill in that spot. If after the elections that spot is still not filled, then it's up to the incoming president, the new president, and that board to find somebody to fill the spot. It's not great. It's best if we can have a secretary, treasurer, and a president in place in plenty of time so they can get prepared. But again, don't put somebody in the position just because you really need that spot filled. Council can help you. Scott's really good at arm twisting, so he can come in and help you find some people. My arm's still a little bruised. So another big don't is don't discuss anything that the committee has discussed outside of the committee. Everything is confidential. You may keep personal notes as you're talking about candidates, but this is an opportunity to really be open and candid with your fellow committee members to really discuss the pros and cons of a certain candidate. And we don't want that getting out because, well, it can get ugly, and it's really, you should feel comfortable being able to have those discussions, knowing that it's a safe space and it's not going past that. In another meeting, somebody asked if they're taking minutes. No minutes. Take notes, destroy the notes afterwards. It is honestly, whatever happens in the committee is just for the committee. The only thing that ever comes out of the committee is the slate of nominees. And that's the third don't is don't report on the results of the committee until the slate is officially announced. So I know Scott may be wanting to know, make sure, hey, do we have a board for next year? You can say we're working on it, just the results. Nobody gets to know the results until the slate is ready. If you have the slate ahead of the 28 days before the election, you can go ahead and sign off and distribute it then. That's fine. It just needs to be done before 28 days. Yes. But once you've decided on your slate and sign off on it, then it can be officially announced, and that's when you have it go out to the communications chair, the president, to go ahead and publicize the slate, along with notice of when the election will be. So as you're looking for candidates, it's really important to make sure that the PTA board reflects the student body and the parents at the school. So look at the school and look at the board that you're designing, and take a good hard look and ask yourself, do we have the ethnic racial makeup? Do we have is there a language that is predominant at the school that is not represented in the PTA board? Special ed, do we have special ed parents represented? So just look at the makeup of the school and look at the board and use that as a way to really, with the goal that the PTA represents and looks like the actual body of the community of the school. One way to just get a good idea of what the demographics of your school is going to, and the data is a couple years old, but it can still give you, unless the data has changed, like Blair with the Armenian Academy, that demographic has changed since 2019. Things got a little slow with COVID. But this link here, if you go in, enter your school name, your 2019, select participation report, can give you a good rundown of what the demographics will look like. If you look at the denominator, which is the amount of students, basically it's the amount of students that were eligible to taking the English language arts test. But it gives you a good idea. Out of this school, there's 544 students total. 153 were English language learners. So that's a really good percentage of EL students. Do you have anybody on your board that is a parent of an EL student? If not, you might want to consider that. Over half of the students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Are you including people whose students qualify for free and reduced lunch? That can have a huge impact on how we approach it. How we approach fundraising, how we deal with financial situations. And in this school, over half are Hispanic or Latinx. So is that population represented? So just keep these things in mind as you're building a board. It is first and foremost making sure that you have an effective board. And then secondly, that board represents the school. And sometimes it takes a commitment to mentor somebody who is a parent leader, but they have not had the opportunity to be a treasurer. That's what council's for, to help mentor that. But as long as they are willing to accept that responsibility, So if you're not able to find parents that fit some of these demographics that you would like to include in your board, look into other parent leaders, AAPC, ELAC, School Site Council, special ed parents, to really see if there are parent leaders there that are also PTA members that can come join the PTA board and start cultivating new PTA leaders. And so back to the quote. So basically, when PTAs represent their communities, they gain strength and effectiveness. And with PTA, we're supposed to speak every child with one voice. So as PTA leaders, we have to be a welcoming and inclusive community for every parent and student and teacher. And that is it.